I never imagined that the day my children thought I was dead would be the day they learned who I truly was. The lawyer was standing at the front of the room, holding a thick brown folder in his hands. My children sat in neat little rows, dressed in black, faces heavy with fake sorrow. My daughter leaned back in her chair, crossed her arms, and sighed dramatically. Then she said the words that sliced through my heart like a cold blade. Finally, we are splitting Mom's $10 million. My son laughed under his breath. My youngest whispered, I told you she left everything to us. And that's when I pushed the door open and walked into the room alive. Gasps filled the air. Faces turned pale. The lawyer nearly dropped the file. My daughter's mouth fell open. My son stood up so fast his chair crashed behind him. Mom, he stammered. Yes, Mom, the woman they had buried in their greed before she was ever placed in the ground. And what they didn't know, what none of them were prepared for, was that every word spoken in that room had already been recorded. Every insult, every greedy laugh, every cruel prediction of how they would spend my money. And the will that lawyer held in his hand was not the will they were expecting. This is the story of how I built $10 million from nothing. This is the story of how my own children forgot I was still breathing. And this is the story of what happened when truth finally walked through the door. But before I take you inside that room, before I tell you what was in that will, and why they all left in tears that day, let me ask you something from one heart to another. If this story already stirred something inside you, if you believe family, truth, and second chances still matter, please take a moment to subscribe. Your support keeps real stories like mine alive. Coming back to story, I wasn't always wealthy. In fact, for most of my life, I was invisible. I raised 3 children on a single income after their father passed away, unexpectedly when the kids were still young. I worked day shifts at a local grocery store and cleaned offices at night. There were weeks I slept in my uniform because changing felt like wasted time. My children never went hungry, but there were nights I did. I remember standing in the kitchen, once dividing one small chicken into 3 neat portions for them, and scraping the bones clean for myself afterward. I told them I'd already eaten at work. They believed me. I believed in them. Years passed. They grew. They moved out. They built lives of their own. And little by little, they stopped calling. I never complained. I started a small home baking business at 62. Pies at first, then cakes, then catering for small events. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Someone posted my cinnamon rolls online once. That post changed everything. Orders flooded in. A local investor helped me turn my kitchen into a storefront. Years later, that little store became a brand. That brand became several locations. Then came licensing deals. Before I knew it, the woman who once skipped meals was a multimillionaire. $10 million. And my children knew. That's when the calls started again. At first, they asked about my health, then about the business, then about legacy, then about estate planning. I smiled politely through every conversation, but something in their voices had changed. They weren't calling to check on me. They were calling to measure me. Then, one quiet winter morning, I collapsed. It wasn't death, just exhaustion. My neighbor found me and called an ambulance. I survived, but news travels fast in small towns. Too fast. By the time I woke up in the hospital, my phone was flooded with messages, not from my children asking if I was okay, but from acquaintances asking if it was true. Is it true you passed? Is your family preparing the funeral? That's when I realized something had gone terribly wrong. My daughter had told everyone I was gone, before anyone had confirmed a single thing. And within hours, my children had contacted a lawyer to begin the process of reading my will, assuming I had already taken my last breath. Not one of them had checked my pulse. When I heard about the scheduled will reading, something inside me went very quiet, not angry, not loud, quiet. And in that silence, I made the hardest decision of my life. I wouldn't cancel it. I wouldn't correct them. I would attend as a ghost who still had a heartbeat. And that is where this story truly begins. I left the hospital without telling my children I had survived. The nurse tried to protest when I asked for a quiet discharge, but I simply told her the truth in my own way. I said, sometimes a mother needs to see what love looks like when she's not in the room. She didn't fully understand, but she helped me anyway. My neighbor picked me up. I sat in the passenger seat, wrapped in a borrowed coat, watching the town pass by through the window. Everything looked the same. The bakery sign with my name on it, the bank across the street, the little diner where I had once worked double shifts, all of it still standing. And yet, I felt like I had already been erased. That same afternoon, I received a call from the lawyer's office. A polite young voice told me that my children had scheduled a formal reading of my will for 3 days later. She offered condolences. I thanked her softly and said nothing more. 3 days. 3 days knowing my children believed I was already gone. 3 days knowing they were already dividing my life into neat little portions. I went home and sat in my living room as the sun went down. I looked at the family photos on the wall. My son in his graduation cap. My daughter on her wedding day. My youngest holding her first baby. Smiles everywhere. Happiness preserved in frames, frozen in time. And yet, I wondered how easily those smiles had turned into calculations. That evening, my phone started ringing. It was my eldest son. I didn't answer. Then my daughter. Then my youngest. Message after message appeared on my screen. Not one said, "Are you okay, Mom?" Not one said, "We love you." They were all logistics. Funeral service. Estate documents. We're handling everything. Handling everything. Except their mother. Late that night, my youngest accidentally left me a voice message. She meant to send it to someone else. I listened as she whispered, hurriedly, "Once the 10 million is split, I'm paying off the house first. I'm tired of struggling." I sat in the dark and let that recording play over and over. That's when I decided to start recording too, not out of revenge, out of truth. From that moment forward, every call, every conversation, every sideways comment from my children was quietly saved. I didn't interrupt them. I didn't accuse them. I simply listened. And they talked. Oh, how they talked. They talked about new cars. They talked about early retirement. They talked about who deserved more, who worked harder, who sacrificed the most. They talked as if I were already ashes. One evening, my daughter visited the bakery after closing hours. She hugged me stiffly at the door, eyes darting around the store like she was appraising furniture. "It smells good in here," she said. "Must be worth a fortune." I smiled gently. "It feeds a lot of people." She laughed softly. "Soon it won't be your problem anymore." That night, I cried at the kitchen table. The next day, I overheard my son arguing with his wife in the parking lot. He didn't notice I was near the window. "They can't all take equal shares," he snapped. I helped her with the business paperwork. "I deserve more." His wife replied, "It's 10 million. Be grateful." He scoffed. "Grateful doesn't pay taxes." My hands shook as I held the coffee cup. By the second day, the town had fully accepted the lie of my death. Sympathy cards flooded my mailbox. People cried when they saw me walk down the street. One woman fainted in the bakery. Some thought they were seeing a ghost. My children had officially announced my passing online. That hurt more than anything. It wasn't the money. It was how easily they erased me. By the morning of the will reading, I stood in front of my bedroom mirror and looked at myself for a long time. White hair pulled into a neat bun, soft wrinkles around my eyes, a face that had loved deeply and quietly for decades. Today, I whispered to my reflection, "They will see you." The lawyer's office was across town. I arrived early and waited in my car. Through the large glass windows, I watched my children gather one by one. They laughed. They hugged. They looked relieved. Relieved. My daughter wore red. My youngest carried a designer purse. My son checked his watch impatiently. No black scarves. No trembling hands. No grief. Only anticipation. Then the lawyer arrived. He shook hands with everyone and ushered them into the main conference room. The blinds were half open. I could see shadows moving inside. I turned on the recording app on my phone and held it in my lap. I watched them take their seats, and then I heard it. My daughter's voice floated faintly through the glass. "Finally, we are splitting Mom's 10 million. Laughter followed. That was when my hands stopped shaking, because something inside me stood up before my body ever did. But before I walked through that door, my mind drifted back to the nights I stayed awake worrying about school clothes, back to the mornings I kissed scraped knees and braided messy hair, back to the first dollar I ever earned from my kitchen, back to the promise I once made to myself. I said, "If I ever become successful, my children will never have to beg." And now they weren't begging. They were counting. I stood from the car slowly. My knees ached. My heart beat calmly, too calmly. As I reached the building entrance, I heard my son's voice through the door. "Once this is done, I'm finally free." Free? From what? I wondered. From me? The door was heavy as I pushed it. The hallway was silent, and at the end of it waited the room where my own life had already been divided without me. But I did not enter just yet. I paused at the door, and I listened. I stood outside that conference room door for a long moment, listening to the sound of my own children speaking about me as if I were already a memory. Their voices floated through the thick wood, casual, confident, unburdened. Once the papers are signed, I'm booking that trip to Italy, my daughter said. My youngest laughed. I just want to feel safe for once. No more worrying about bills. My son cleared his throat. Let's not act like this is luck. Mom worked hard. We just get to enjoy the results. The results. I closed my eyes. For a brief moment, I considered turning around, walking away, letting them believe their version of the ending. But then I remembered the nights I skipped supper, the mornings I rose before the sun, and the years I quietly gave without ever keeping score. No, this story needed truth. I pushed the door open. The sound it made was small, just a soft click, but it sliced through that room like thunder. Every head turned at once. The lawyer's pen froze in his hand. My daughter dropped her phone. My son stood up, so fast his chair scraped loudly against the floor. No one spoke. Their faces drained of color, as if all the blood in their bodies had suddenly remembered where it belonged. I took one slow step inside, then another. "Hello," I said softly. It took my daughter a full 10 seconds to find her voice. "Mom?" My son stammered. "But we were told," the hospital said. "I collapsed." I said, "I didn't die." The lawyer stumbled to his feet. "Mrs. Thompson, we were informed." "Yes," I said gently. "You were informed incorrectly. It seems my death was greatly exaggerated." My youngest began to cry, real tears, not neat ones, the kind that come when the floor drops out from under your assumptions. I looked at them one by one. "So," I said, "this is how you speak of me when you think I can't hear?" Silence wrapped around the room. The lawyer cleared his throat. "Would you like to sit, Mrs. Thompson?" "I would like to listen," I replied, "since that is what everyone here has been doing without me." My son slowly lowered himself back into his chair. My daughter folded her hands tightly in her lap. "I didn't mean it like that," she whispered. I tilted my head. "How did you mean it when you said you'd finally be splitting my $10 million? Her eyes shut. "I didn't think." "No," I said calmly, "you didn't." The lawyer tried to regain his professional footing. "This meeting was scheduled under the belief that you had passed. In light of this development, we should reschedule." "No," I said quietly, "we should not." Every eye returned to me. "I came today," I continued, "because I wanted to hear what you all believed I meant to leave behind." My son swallowed. "Mom, we're confused. We were told." "You were told," I said, "what was convenient to believe." I reached into my purse and placed my phone on the table. "I have been listening for days," I said, "listening to what you plan to buy, where you plan to go, how you plan to divide me." Their faces shifted with dawning realization. I pressed play. My youngest's voice filled the room. "Once the money comes through, I'm finally paying off the house." My son's voice followed. "I deserve a bigger cut. I helped with the paperwork." Then my daughter's laughter. "I already picked out the car." The room shrank. My son stared at the table. My daughter's chin trembled. My youngest sobbed, openly now. I stopped the recording. No one asked me one single time if I was afraid. I said softly. No one asked if I was in pain. No one asked if I needed comfort, only money. My son shook his head. Mom, I was scared. Scared of what? I asked. He hesitated. Scared of losing you. I looked at him carefully. And did thinking I was already gone make that fear lighter or heavier? He couldn't answer. The lawyer stood awkwardly at the head of the table. Mrs. Thompson, legally, the will is still valid whether you attend or not. But we cannot proceed without your consent. I nodded. Then proceed. I said. They all looked up. Proceed. I repeated. The lawyer adjusted his glasses and opened the folder with slightly shaking hands. The last will and testament of Margaret Thompson. I straightened in my chair. This document was drafted 3 years ago and updated 6 months ago. My daughter's eyes flickered toward me sharply. The lawyer began reading. At first, it was small things, charitable donations, scholarships at the community college, a fund for single parents in my town, support for elderly neighbors who had no family. They listened politely at first. Then confusion set in. My son leaned forward. Those are good causes. But then the lawyer continued. To my eldest son, I leave my forgiveness. My son stiffened. To my daughter, I leave my strength. Her brow furrowed. To my youngest, I leave my courage. Tears streamed freely now. The lawyer cleared his throat again. And finally, the remaining estate of $10 million. The room leaned inward. Shall remain in trust during my lifetime, to be managed according to my wishes. Shock. My daughter stood abruptly. What does that mean? It means, the lawyer said cautiously, that the funds are not currently being distributed. My son's voice trembled. Then when do we receive it? When your mother chooses, he answered. They turned toward me slowly. Not as heirs, as children. I held their gaze calmly. You spoke of freedom, I said softly. Let me tell you what freedom truly is. Freedom is being able to give without expecting return. Freedom is loving without counting. Freedom is knowing that no matter what happens to the money, you will be okay. My daughter dropped back into her chair. My youngest whispered, So, we get nothing? You get what you have always had. I said, a mother who loves you, and a chance to relearn what that love means. My son's voice cracked. Mom, I never meant to sound greedy. But you did, I replied gently. Silence filled the room again. Heavier now. Honest. The lawyer quietly closed the folder. Mrs. Thompson, would you like me to read the remainder? No, I said, not yet. I stood slowly, resting my hands on the table. I didn't come here to punish you. I said, I came here because I wanted to see if my children still recognized me, without the weight of my wealth attached. They looked at me, truly looked at me, for the first time in years. And now, I continued, I see that this room does not only hold greed, it holds confusion, fear, and very wounded hearts. My youngest whispered, Mom, we messed up. Tears slid down my daughter's face. My son's hands shook. I raised you better than this. I said softly, and yet I also raised you with love, which means I believe you can still become better than this moment. My son stood. What do we do? I looked at each of them slowly. You start by remembering that your mother is not an inheritance. I said. The room trembled with truth, but something still remained unspoken. Something heavy, something that would shake everything they believed about who I was and what I had seen. And that truth was waiting in the final pages of the will. The lawyer hesitated when I didn't immediately ask him to continue. His fingers rested on the last pages of the will like they were heavier than the rest. You may go on now, I finally said. He nodded once and adjusted his glasses. There is an additional letter attached to the final section of the estate, he said, written in your mother's own hand. My daughter's eyes widened. My youngest leaned forward. My son pressed his palms flat against the table. The lawyer unfolded the letter slowly, and then he began to read my words out loud. My dear children, if you are hearing this letter without my voice in the room, then it means one of two things. Either I have truly left this world, or you believed I had. My daughter inhaled sharply. I want you to know that everything I ever built was built with your faces in my heart. Every long night, every aching morning, every sacrifice, it was always for you, not for money, not for praise, for you. My youngest sobbed quietly, but something changed over the years. Somewhere between your childhood and your adulthood, love began to feel like a transaction. Calls became schedules. Visits became obligations. And my worth began to feel measured in numbers instead of memories. My son wiped his eyes furiously. For a long time, I pretended not to notice. A mother will always make excuses for her children, but pretending is a lonely thing. The lawyer paused briefly. Silence pressed in on all of us. If you are sitting in a room right now speaking about my wealth with relief instead of remembering my voice with love, then something has gone terribly wrong. And I forgive you for it. My daughter broke down completely. Forgiveness, the lawyer continued. Voice tight does not mean I will reward greed. It means I will not let it destroy you. The money you expected to inherit will not save you from the emptiness that grows when family becomes a business deal. My youngest whispered, Mom, the trust exists, the letter said, so that I may continue to watch not what you buy, but who you become. When I see kindness where there was calculation, humility where there was entitlement, and gratitude where there was expectation, then and only then will the money serve its true purpose. My son fell to his knees beside his chair. He didn't speak. He just shook. The lawyer's voice softened. If you are hearing this while I am still alive, then understand that this moment was allowed, not to shame you, but to wake you. He stopped reading. The room was filled with quiet crying now. Not dramatic, not for show. The deep, honest kind. I stood slowly. You see, I said softly, I never wanted you to fear me. I only wanted you to remember me. My daughter rushed toward me and dropped to her knees. I'm sorry, she sobbed. I didn't mean it like that. I got swallowed by the idea of money. I forgot what mattered. My son followed her. I failed you? He choked. I talked about you like you were already gone. I measured you instead of loving you. I hate myself for that. My youngest clung to my waist like she had when she was small. "Please don't take our mother away from us over this," she begged. I placed my hands on their trembling shoulders. "I never came here to take myself away," I whispered. "I came here to give you back to yourselves." They looked up at me with red eyes full of fear and hope tangled together. "My wealth never belonged to you," I said gently. "It belonged to the work, the people, the town, and the purpose that built it. If I give you money without healing your hearts first, I would be abandoning you all over again." My son nodded slowly. "We don't deserve it." "Deserve is not the word," I replied. "Ready is the word." The lawyer cleared his throat quietly. "Mrs. Thompson, would you like to close the meeting?" "Yes," I said, "I would." They all waited. "I love you," I said, "and today hurt, but perhaps it hurt in the way a bone must break before it heals straight." My daughter whispered, "What do we do now?" "You go home," I said. "You look at your lives, and you decide whether you want to become people I would be proud to leave something to, or people who already lost more than money today." They nodded slowly, still on their knees. The lawyer stood back, quietly, as they rose. None of them reached for their phones. None of them mentioned money again. Instead, my son hugged me, hard, shaking. Then my daughter. Then my youngest. It wasn't neat. It wasn't graceful. It was broken people clinging to the one place they still felt they belonged. When they finally released me, my daughter said through tears, "We told everyone you were gone." "I know," I replied. "We'll fix it," my son said. "We'll tell them the truth." "You already have," I said softly. They looked confused. "You told it with your tears," I said. "That is the truth people never doubt." They left together, quietly. The lawyer waited until the door closed behind them. "I've never seen anything like that," he said. "I hope you never have to again," I replied. Outside, I watched them through the glass as they walked into the sunlight, not as heirs, not as claimants, but as children who had just been returned to their childhood. And for the first time in years, I knew they finally saw me, not as $10 million, but as their mother. The days after the will reading passed more quietly than I expected. No reporters showed up. No angry phone calls followed. No sudden demands for explanations. Instead, something far more unfamiliar began to take shape. Silence. But this time, it wasn't the cold kind of silence that felt like abandonment. This silence felt like reflection. On the third morning after the meeting, my son stood outside my front door before sunrise. I saw him through the window, standing awkwardly with his hands folded in front of him, like a nervous little boy waiting to be let inside after breaking a rule. I opened the door slowly. "Mom," he said, "no excuses, no speeches, just Mom." I stepped aside and let him in. He sat at my kitchen table the same way he used to when he was 10 years old, shoulders slightly hunched, eyes lowered, waiting. "I told everyone the truth," he said quietly, "that you were alive, that we made a mistake, that we were wrong." I nodded. People were shocked. He added, "But they understood." I poured 2 cups of coffee and placed one in front of him. Without speaking, I thought money would fix the emptiness I felt. He said, "I didn't realize it was you I was missing." That was the moment I knew my son was finally listening with his heart instead of his fear. Later that afternoon, my daughters came together. Not separately, together. My eldest stood stiff at first, but the moment she saw me, her strength gave way. She burst into tears and folded into my arms like she had done as a child after her very first heartbreak. I spent years chasing comfort. She cried. I forgot the woman who taught me what comfort actually was. My youngest sat quietly beside us, wiping her tears with trembling hands. "I was scared all the time," she whispered. "Scared of failing, scared of struggling. I looked at your money like it was a rescue instead of seeing you as my shelter." I held both of them close and rocked them gently, the way I had when they were small. "You never needed rescuing," I said softly. "You only needed reminding." Something began to change after that. They didn't suddenly become perfect. They became present. They started calling without asking about the business. They visited without needing a reason. We ate dinners that weren't rushed. We laughed about small things again. Old memories returned slowly, like birds finding their way back to a familiar place. Weeks later, my son approached me one evening after dinner. "Mom, I want to help at the bakery again," he said. "Not for money, just to learn, to contribute." That was the day I knew humility had finally replaced entitlement. My daughter asked to volunteer at the single-parent fund I built. My youngest began helping elderly neighbors who reminded her of me. None of them asked about the trust. Not once. 3 months passed before I brought it up again. We sat together on my porch as the sun dipped low, painting the sky with soft gold and lavender. "You remember what the will said?" I told them gently. They nodded. "I think it's time we talk about what comes next." They sat forward quietly, not with greed, with nervous respect. "The trust was never a punishment," I said. "It was protection. Protection from becoming strangers to yourselves." And now I see children who remember who they are. My son swallowed. "We don't deserve anything, Mom." I smiled softly. "You never did, and neither did I. Love is not earned. It is lived." They waited. I have decided to begin releasing small portions of the estate. I continued, not as inheritances, as responsibilities. Their eyes widened slightly. "The first portion goes into community housing for families in crisis," I said. "You will help oversee it." They nodded immediately. "The second goes into expanding education programs for children who grow up the way you once did." More nods. "And the rest will remain where it belongs, waiting until the day I no longer need to watch over you myself." They didn't argue. They didn't celebrate. They simply thanked me. And in that moment, I knew the money finally mattered less than the people. Years will pass after this story ends. One day, that trust will be released fully, but it will not fall into hands driven by hunger. It will fall into hands shaped by growth. And that was all I ever wanted. Today, when my children walk beside me, people no longer whisper about wealth. They comment on how close we are. They see us laughing at cafes, volunteering together, sitting quietly at church. They see a family that almost lost itself. and found its way home. If you are listening to my story right now, and you have ever felt forgotten, used, or measured by the people you love, I want you to remember this. Sometimes the greatest inheritance you will ever receive is being seen again. And sometimes the greatest wealth you'll ever hold is forgiveness. If this story touched your heart, even a little bit, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who may need healing, and subscribe to Soft Wounds. Every subscription keeps stories like mine alive, and every shared story reminds someone out there that they are not alone. From my heart to yours, thank you for listening, and may love always arrive before money ever does.